Well, it's a great welcome to all of our listeners joining us from around the world this afternoon, this evening, or this morning, depending where you're calling in from. I'm Philip Judge. I'm the president of a company called Unique that's hosting and putting on this webinar over the next 30 or 40 minutes or so. And again, a great welcome to everybody. This is the last of several big day calls we've had over the last 24 hours or so, and they've been well attended from people all around the world that are interested in knowing what is our Gold Tribe all about. So you're listening to the voice of Philip Judge. I'm the president of this company, Unique, and again, welcome to this webinar that could change your life. In fact, it's interesting that there is several times in your life, probably once or twice only, that something comes along that changes your life forever. And that in fact happened to me in the late 1980s and the early 1990s when I stumbled over a truth. What I discovered was that there was a global deception, what you could call a cover-up, or in fact an outright fraud. And I discovered that this was the largest deception in all the history of mankind. And that totally changed the course of my life, which brings us to this day in May 2010, where we're on this big day call together. What I discovered, and you may say that's a big claim, saying that you've discovered the largest deception in the history of man. How come I don't know about it? In fact, that's a really good question. 100 or more years ago, there was a banker that said if only one man in 100,000 would truly understand the deception that I discovered about 20, 25 years ago now. And again, you may say that's a very big claim, but let me give you 3 reasons why this is the biggest deception in all of human history. First of all, it's gone for so long. It's been 100 years now that this deception has existed. The second thing is it's global. It affects 97% of 7 billion people on the face of the planet today. And the third thing is its far-reaching implications. What I mean by that is this deception and cover-up will in fact touch unborn generations that are not yet born if it's allowed to continue the way it currently is. So you may be scratching your head and wondering, what is this man talking about? Let me tell you, at the very core of this deception is the fact that 7 billion people on the face of planet Earth today have been lied to by their governments about the money that we are using every day of the week. They've been told mistruths or lies about the money that we're using every single day of the week. And that's brought about the financial economy that we're living in today. And we're all aware of the financial instability in the world around us. This led me in the 1990s to set up a company called Anglo Far East, and it became the largest private custodial company and the original private custodial company of gold and silver today. In fact, that's a picture of me there standing in front of several millions of dollars of silver and gold bars in our vault in Cologne in Zurich. This company was really positioned to serve what we call the financial elite, or the extremely wealthy people or wealthy families and some of the wealthy institutions on planet Earth. And what I discovered with the wealthy people on this planet, the top 3%, the financial elite, is that they do things differently. First of all, they have a different mindset. They have different wealth principles that they've put into place over sometimes many generations in their families or their institutions or whoever they are. And the other thing is they've always had, regardless of whether it's a boom time or a recession or a Holocaust or a war, they've always had the private ownership of gold and silver. So let me remind you, there's 2 things that I've noticed with the wealthy. First of all, they have different wealth principles, different wealth strategies that they've put into play. And the second thing is they've always had the private ownership of gold and silver. So we went about on a crusade. In 2007 and 2008, we launched a company which is today called Unique, and we have the single purpose and crusade, which is to set people free. Who knows that the truth shall set you free? There's an old proverb that says that. And in fact, by setting people free, by exposing this deception that I've talked about, the largest deception in all of human history. So that really brings us to who we are as a company. We're about telling you the truth about the monetary system and explaining to you so that you understand why the money you use and the money you save is so important to understand it, because it will truly set you apart from the people that don't understand this truth. That's why it's so important to understand the money that we're using on a day-to-day basis. In other words, to expose this deception, first of all to ourselves and then to our family and friends and the people around us. On the next slide, what you'll see is two charts. On the left-hand side, you'll see that the national currencies, or the government money, if you want to use that term, is inflating at a massive rate. Over the last 20 years or so, money has been expanding or inflating at record rates in all of history. In fact, this has really been going on for 100 years now, as long as this deception has been going on. And what happens is that when governments expand money, and they either print more money or they use the banks to lend it, which creates debt, of course, but it also inflates the amount of money. When they do that, what we get is the opposite proportional effect, as we see on the right-hand side, where we see the dollar, for example, doesn't matter whether it's an Australian dollar, a New Zealand dollar, US or Canadian dollar, or euro or British pound, all our national currencies worldwide are inflating at the same rate. And what we get is this plunge of purchasing power in our national currency. It's a thing called inflation. When you go to the shops every week now, or the gasoline station, you'll notice that you're paying more for petrol, more for gasoline, more for your weekly groceries than you did last week and last month. That's a thing that we know as inflation. In fact, on this next slide, MSN Money, you see where your dollars are just like Monopoly money. We probably all remember playing Monopoly, and I used to think as a child, imagine if you had an extra packet of money, of this paper money, Monopoly money, that you could simply put into your own bank while you're playing the game. Surely you would win that game. Well, of course, that's called counterfeit today, but that's illegal for citizens to counterfeit money, but for governments, it's perfectly legal and normal. In fact, they counterfeiting or making this monopoly at extra fast rates, more than at any other time in human history, in more than 6,000 years that we've recorded monetary history. How do we protect ourselves from inflation? Well, in fact, the master economist, Dr. Alan Greenspan, said all the way back in 1967 that in the absence of gold, now listen to that word gold, we're going to talk more about that in the next little while, but in the absence of gold, there's just no way to protect savings, or in other words, your wealth, from confiscation through inflation. There's no safe store of value without gold. You see, gold has given us a very constant purchasing power through all of time. We've seen this throughout all of history. In fact, 2,000 years ago, you'd see that at 1 ounce of gold, when Jesus was walking the planet, 1 ounce of gold would buy a man a very good outfit, a good toga, a nice handcrafted coat, a good leather belt, and a very good pair of leather sandals. Now, just 100 years ago, that same ounce of gold was now worth $20, $20 US dollars. And in the same way, that $20 or the ounce of gold would buy that man there a very fine suit, a good top hat, and a good pair of shoes. Now today, that same ounce of gold, it's no longer $20. In fact, staggeringly, it's now $1,150, close to $1,200. The same ounce of gold will still buy me a very fine suit, a good top hat, a cotton shirt, a good belt, and a good pair of shoes. So what I'm really saying here is that gold has always had this very constant purchasing power over time. Now, I often counsel people in areas of finances, and one of the questions I always ask is, are you a saver? And oftentimes people will be very proud about the fact that they've been very diligent in their savings. And savings is a very important discipline to have. And when I start talking to them a little bit further, I find out, in fact, that they've been doing themselves a massive disservice. Have a look at this graph here. Now, let's say the person I was talking to said to me they were saving $300 per month over the last 20 years. Over the last 20 years, they would have in fact contributed $72,000 in a savings plan, according to this middle line, the blue line here that we see in this graph. But staggeringly, the inflation would have really impacted the purchasing power of that $72,000. Remember I said earlier that as money inflates, its purchasing power deflates or plunges. Well, in fact, the $72,000 would only have $56,000 worth of purchasing power. But have a look at this. Look at the green line. Now imagine that over the last 20 years they were putting just $300 per month towards gold. What would the effect be? It's a staggering $232,000 that person would have created extra wealth for themselves and protected themselves against deflation, or I should say inflation, or plunge in purchasing power through owning gold. So it's not just a matter of having the right discipline towards savings, but in fact it's having the savings in the correct form. You don't want to have your savings in national currencies. You need to have it in the right form. The money of kings, we often call it, which is gold and silver. Now,